Hi, I'm Spencer, a sculptor from Kansas City. Welcome to the studio and also the giveaway. Yes, that's right. We are going to be giving away the sculpture that you are watching me make. And so now it's time for week 2. It's week 2. But week 2 of what? We are making a gigantic portrait bust of an animal, and we're going to show you the whole process, and we're going to give it away at the end. Last week, we got the rough thing sculpted, and I went a little overboard on the clothing, got it pretty dang close, and now we're going to show you what I've been working on. It is a lion. So we're making a sculpture of a lion as a Victorian-era explorer. And I know it may look like this is pretty far along, but actually most of the work is still waiting to happen. Along the way, we're going to scan this thing and reduce this thing and enlarge this thing and make a huge sculpture of this thing. And in fact, I was just talking with Hoodie about this. I got to bust my hump over the next few days to get this thing all finished up so that we can move to the next part of the process. You can see, I've roughed in all the clothing and I've roughed in the expression, and I've got the tilt of his head the way I want it. I'm still experimenting with the hair and what the right texture is going to be with the hair. If you ever look at hair in sculpture, it's really weird if you take it as it actually is, because I'm trying to represent individual hairs and a volume at the same time. So it's like one of the weirdest things to do in sculpture. So I've got a lot of thinking to do there. I've got to think about how the fur on his snout is going to be, and how that transition from his smooth nose, which has got to look a little bit wet, right, into that hair. I've got to figure out if I really want this strap to be leather and what the difference in the leather texture is versus the wool of this coat. All of those things have to happen. You were asking me earlier about, listening to music and stuff and, getting in the flow, right? Like, because it's, any creative work, like long form, writing a novel or something, creative work, you got to get into it. And it takes a minute to get into it. Like, one of the easiest ways for me to get in that mode reliably, that flow state that everybody is so desperately chasing these days, is listening to music that I know every single word, change, and harmony to, right? Like, I don't listen, when I'm sculpting, I don't listen to new things. It engages a part of my brain that allows another part of my brain to express itself. So I'm at the phase now where I've made most of my big decisions in a good way, right? Things that I'm like, okay, I know like which parts of his face I think are real important, and which of these folds I want to accentuate, and then the tilt of his head, obviously. And a minute ago I was just kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool. I looked at him, and I had kind of added a little bit of clay in his eyeballs enough that it looked like he was looking off to the right, and I thought, oh man, that's really neat to think about. He's not even looking at you. So if I change the eyeballs around a little bit, he's like looking off over here, which I think is neat. And so I'm just kind of gonna go with that. I'm making lots of little decisions like that maybe I change, maybe I go with, maybe that's part of the final sculpture, maybe not. I mean, I started knowing I wanted to make a lion wearing this outfit, and that's about it, right? And the reason his head is tilted is because early on I was like, ooh, that's kind of cool. And now here we are. Same reason with this big, like, part of hair. I thought, I just lumped some clay on. I was like, ooh, that's kind of neat. And so a lot of it is just like, ooh, that's fun. Ooh, that's neat. Or, oh, I don't like that. Let's do something different. I thought it might be cool to, like, maybe he needs a little mustache. I did that earlier. And I'm not sure, like, I've got to figure out those whiskers somehow. I certainly can't sculpt those, super, super skinny whiskers coming off like this. But I'm not sure yet. That makes him a little too like, and I don't know that I want that yet. Basically, that's all I'm doing, is just having this conversation with myself. I'm getting close to liking the kind of the structure of his face. Once I feel like it's locked in, then I'll finish out the eyes and then add all that texture and hair, which is going to be really fun figuring out. I mean, those are individual little tiny hairs, but they have kind of a vibe to them that I have to recreate. It's not going to be hair, but I have to I have to bring you along in the journey of maybe it's hair, right? I took this class, all the incoming freshmen have to take it, and it's Gestalt theory. And it's basically just all about like what people's minds do when you suggest to them different patterns and shapes, and like, you know, trying to make you think that this lump of clay is actually a lion. So getting pretty far along here, probably 2 hours away from being finished with the lion. You know, I'm in here working on projects all the time, right? But we started this project, and you know, Hoodie, you came in here and started filming me, and it really lit a fire. I mean, I probably would have let this lion take 3 weeks longer than it has taken, just because, you know, oh, it's easy to work on other things, sit down on other things, but it's really been awesome having a deadline on this. You know, basically I went from this not being done to it being almost done in about a day and a half, which, you know, is freaking great. A lot of hours of sculpture, but we're getting close. You know, this is probably one of the hardest, texture and hair and, you know, things that are like a whole bunch of tiny individual shapes that make up a volume but still retain their individuality, right? That's what hair is. It's one of the hardest things. Well, if you look at the back here, right, you can see I've made these individual, you know, Medusa worms or whatever. And so that was just me trying to figure out what are the groupings of hair doing. And then I tried, like, I have probably 20 or 30 different brushes. You can see how this one is like, you know, these small little bristles, all made by me. This one right here is the same bristles, but just fewer of them and a little bit longer, so it's a teensy bit more flexible. So each one does different things, leaves a different texture. The first one I tried was this one right here, which is actually hangers welded to a steel bar. And you know, you can see when I do that, it makes a totally different kind of texture, much bigger, deeper lines. And I did that at first, and it just wasn't quite right. If you look at this lion's hair, he's got this really coarse hair. It's like it's full of dirt, right? Tons of volume, but at the same time, it's also very flowy and delicate. So I kind of settled on this brush for this, and what I'm doing now is I'm basically kind of trying to treat each individual little, you know, Medusa snake, whatever we'll call them, give it a directional texture with this brush, and then I'm going to go back with a heated tool and I'll slick that down, because after we get the volume and the texture, then it's about shadows and highlights. Here, I'll just show you that real quick, right? So when I use the heated tool, what that does is it flattens down some of these lines, which creates a highlight, and it leaves some of the lines, which creates a shadow, right? So this is just a dental tool, just get that a little hot, and then when I come in here and I follow this texture, see, it just creates like a highlight and a shadow for the hair. And once I do that across the, you know, the course of the whole head, it'll just kind of start to feel like a volume of hair with individual strands. So I realized that the transition between the, you know, the really soft fur of his face to the more textured fur of his mane needed something. And so right before I left, I added all these little bits all the way around the perimeter of the face. And I had to get those on there. I had to get those on there before I left last night. Otherwise, I would have forgotten that little instance, you know. It's doing this hair texture. And same thing with like adding the texture on the back here. It's like the same thing over and over, but at the same time, each decision is different. So you can't just fall asleep. But it is a little bit like meditative almost, you know? It's funny, there's like all the old-timey sculpture books, which I've read, like every old book on how to make figurative sculpture, like, you know, from the 1800s and stuff, like even some that I had to like have shipped from Europe. They're all like, make sure you keep your work surface clean. I'm like, oops. I am Not the most natively tidy person in the world. So now again, like, I don't know how to do this. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I've done this a million times before, but each time it's different. So we're just doing it. Do you know what I mean? That makes sense.
Yeah. Do you feel like you would be effective at teaching someone how to?
No. Maybe I'd be wrong. Maybe my wife would disagree with me or something. But I feel like I figured out how to do this. I taught myself, right? I mean, I think I've told you, I have a degree in sculpture, but I didn't learn how to make a lump of clay look like a figure there. Because that's something you do by yourself alone for hours. But I do believe anybody can do it. I mean, I say that. Anybody can do it. And people are like, oh no, blah, blah, blah. Anybody who is sufficiently interested and willing to do the work can learn how to make awesome sculptures. There is no magic here. Well, that's not true. There is only magic here after you've done a ton of work. I don't believe in talent. Other than the talent that makes you sit in the driveway and shoot 1,000 free throws every single day, right? Because it's fun enough that you want to do it. It's fun enough that you want to do it even when it's not fun. There's this book, probably the best book on creativity and art making. It's called Art and Fear. It's by David Bales and Ted Orland, and any young creative person, or any creative person, which is to say every person, should read it. And most of that book is about the fact that being creative is work, and it's a skill, and it can be learned, and it can be developed, and that yes, maybe there is such a thing as talent, right? Not everybody's going to be Michael Jordan, not everybody's going to be Beethoven, but those are edge cases that don't actually concern us anyway. As you know, I play basketball, will play again, basketball fairly regularly. And I am always in my head, as I've been thinking about shooting, because I'm a mediocre shooter. I think the people who have less going on in their brain, or people who are able to have less going on in their brain, are better shooters. Because when you release that shot, if you're thinking about whether or not it's going to go in, you likely send it off in the wrong direction. So that makes perfect sense to me that Michael Jordan's superpower would be to be here right now and nowhere else. And the closest I get to that, I mean, it's different when I'm talking to you, but like when I'm doing this, I'm not anywhere else. And so it's available to all of us. You know, greatness in a specific thing. You can be great at anything if you're willing to freaking practice it 8 hours a day. There's no question. And that's the closest thing to a philosophy of art making that I have. Woo! It has been a pretty intense couple of days of sculpture, and that's awesome. I mean, it's really, this process has been great for me to like focus and grind. Basically brought everything to the finish point with the lion. Got all the detail in. I figured out how we were going to blend the hair of his face, those little tiny little hairs, in with the bigger mane here. You know, I focused on figuring out how the highlights and shadows were going to show up in his hair. I'm really happy with that. We even worked a lot, my wife and I, on figuring out how we wanted the back of this to look in the smaller sculptures. So it's really great. I mean, I'm really happy with it. And I think, here's the thing. This is not one big project. It's a billion little tiny decisions made over and over and over again, pushing it down the line to finished. I mean, really, the reason this is here is because of hours and hours of work. And that's the lesson I want to get at. That's why I grind so hard on the I don't believe in talent. And I mean, I guess, of course I believe in talent, because there are some people who are just so skilled at something that it's magical for all of us to watch. But most of the time, 99% of the time, it does not matter. The differentiator is hard work. That's the only thing that I can control. That's the only thing that you can control. The reason I'm a good sculptor is because I have spent hours and hours and hours not being as good a sculptor as I wanted to be and getting better. I just don't know any other way to do anything other than to work hard at it and get better at it. And I guarantee you, if you work hard at it, you will get better at it. So, enough soapboxing. What are we going to do next? Next week, we're going to get into the really interesting part of how we take this guy and shrink him down using technology. We're going to talk about
how technology has changed the work that I've done, and I'm going to show you the process of how I make up for the fact that I have, these big hands and can't make small sculptures using technology. And, enter the contest, right? We're going to give the big version of this away, right? Later on in the series, we're going to take this guy and we're going to make him bigger, make him a sculpture that every time someone walks into your home, they'll be like, oh my gosh, what is that thing? And then we're going to give it away. So make sure you look in the description below so that you can enter the contest to actually win the big sculpture that we're going to make. That's it for this week. I cannot even tell you how much I appreciate you spending your time watching this. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Make sure you come back next week, see the technology conversation, see what the progress we're going to make. And I really appreciate you being here. Talk to you soon.